Start your mornings with clarity, discipline, and purpose through 7 brutal Stoic lessons to rewire your brain before 6 a.m. Win the day Stoic Brath. This video reveals practical Stoic strategies to master your thoughts, build resilience, and take control of your day before the world demands your attention. Learn how small morning decisions shape long-term success and mental strength. Subscribe to the channel now to receive powerful Stoic lessons and mindset training as soon as they are released. Why do so many men lose the day before the sun is even up? Not in the office, not in the gym, not out in the world. The battle is usually lost in silence, in that tiny space between the alarm going off and the first decision being made. That is where the day tilts. That is where momentum is either built or broken. Most people wake up and surrender almost instantly. They reach for the phone. They bargain with the snooze button. They let anxiety write the opening line of the day before their feet even touch the floor. And then they wonder why they already feel behind before sunrise. Stoicism Breath teaches something harsh but freeing. The morning is not just a routine. It is a test of character. Marcus Aurelius understood this well. At dawn, he reminded himself that the day would bring difficult people, distractions, resistance, and discomfort. He prepared his mind before the world got access to it. That is the real lesson. If you do not program your brain before 6 a.m., the world will do it for you. And the world is not interested in your discipline. It is interested in your attention. So the first brutal lesson is this: stop negotiating with your alarm. There is one moment every morning that reveals more about your character than most people realize. It is not when you brush your teeth. It is not when you pour your coffee. It is not when you check your schedule. It is the instant your alarm goes off. In that second, most men begin negotiating. 5 more minutes. I went to bed late. I deserve a little extra rest. I will start tomorrow. It sounds harmless, small, invisible. But what you are really doing in that moment is something much deeper. You are teaching your brain that your word does not mean much. You are proving to yourself that comfort has more authority than commitment. Every time you hit snooze, you reinforce a dangerous identity. I act based on what feels easy, not on what I said I would do. The Stoics would have recognized this immediately as a failure of discipline. And to them, discipline was never just about productivity. It was a form of self-respect. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, still had to battle the same resistance you feel. He wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being." Think about that. An emperor, a man commanding armies, a man carrying the weight of an empire. And still, he had to confront the urge to stay in bed. The difference was not that he never felt resistance. The difference was that he refused to negotiate with it. And modern neuroscience supports this ancient insight in a powerful way. The first decision of the day sets the tone for cognitive control. When you override comfort immediately, you strengthen the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for discipline, restraint, and long-term thinking. But when you delay, when you keep bargaining, you strengthen impulsivity instead. This is why waking up is not really about the clock. It is not about impressing anyone with early mornings. It is about identity. Because if you cannot win the first decision of the day, how will you win the hard decisions at 3 p.m. when you are tired, frustrated, distracted, and under pressure? The snooze button is not just a button. It is a tiny contract with weakness. And standing up immediately is a contract with strength. You do not need motivation in that moment. Motivation is too unstable for a battle this important. What you need is obedience to your own word. That is the Stoic protocol. The alarm rings. Your feet hit the floor immediately. No thinking. No debate. No emotional discussion with yourself. You move before your mind has time to argue. Because discipline is easier than regret. Many men wait until they feel ready. Stoics did not. They trained themselves to act before readiness arrived. That is where real power begins. Immediate movement sends a message through your nervous system. I am in control here. Not my mood. Not my laziness. Not my excuses. Me. And over time, something changes. Waking up stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like authority. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to respect yourself more. And self-respect, once earned honestly, compounds. That is the part most people miss. The world rarely defeats a man in one dramatic collapse. It defeats him in quiet hesitations, in private compromises, in tiny surrenders that seem harmless in the moment but become patterns over time. And that first hesitation in the morning is often where the pattern begins. So tomorrow, when the alarm rings, do not negotiate. Do not explain. Do not delay. Stand up. Win the first battle. Because the man who cannot conquer his bed will struggle to conquer his life. I arise with purpose. I do not negotiate with weakness. I arise with purpose. I do not negotiate with weakness. That statement is not just motivation. It is a decision. And once you win that first battle with your alarm, the next lesson begins immediately. Because waking up early alone does not make you strong. What you do after you wake up, that is what rewires your brain. Lesson 2 is simple, but uncomfortable. Train your brain in discomfort before the world tests you. Look around at modern life. Most of us live in environments designed to remove discomfort. Temperature is controlled with a tap. Food arrives in minutes. Entertainment is endless. Silence is rare. Every inconvenience is smoothed out before it even touches us. And yet, despite all this comfort, anxiety is higher than ever. Discipline feels weaker. Resilience feels thinner. People feel overwhelmed by small things that once would have been considered normal. Why does this happen? Because a brain that never experiences voluntary discomfort begins to panic when discomfort becomes unavoidable. The problem is not that life is harder than before. The problem is that we are less trained to face difficulty. The Stoics understood this thousands of years before modern neuroscience gave it technical language. Seneca, one of the great Stoic thinkers, intentionally practiced discomfort. Some nights, he slept on the floor instead of a bed. He wore simple clothing. He ate modest meals. Not because he had to, but because he refused to become fragile. He would ask himself, "Is this what I feared?" And in doing so, he trained himself to face hardship before hardship arrived. Today, science calls this stress adaptation. When you expose your body and mind to controlled discomfort, cold water, physical exertion, silence, fasting, your nervous system becomes stronger. You teach your brain that discomfort is not danger. It is simply sensation. It is challenge. It is growth. But when you avoid discomfort completely, your tolerance shrinks. Suddenly, a minor inconvenience feels like a crisis. A small rejection feels like failure. A difficult conversation feels unbearable. Not because you are weak by nature, but because you are untrained. Before 6 a.m., you are given a rare opportunity, a sacred window, to step voluntarily into controlled hardship. It does not have to be extreme. It does not require heroic effort. It can be simple and deliberate. A cold shower for 60 seconds when every part of you wants warm comfort. 10 push-ups when your hand reaches instinctively for your phone. Sitting in silence instead of turning on noise. Reading something challenging instead of consuming distractions. You are not punishing yourself. You are fortifying yourself. And something powerful happens when you do this consistently. There is a measurable shift inside your brain. When you choose discomfort voluntarily, your body releases norepinephrine and dopamine in balanced waves. You feel alert, focused, present, not jittery, not overwhelmed, sharp. More importantly, you build trust with yourself. That trust is priceless, because every time you do something difficult on purpose, you send a message inward. I can handle discomfort. I am stronger than my impulses. Most men seek comfort first thing in the morning because they believe they deserve ease before facing the world. But Stoicism Breath flips that idea completely. You do not earn strength by avoiding difficulty. You earn comfort by confronting difficulty first. When you choose discomfort early, the rest of the day feels lighter. When you choose ease early, the rest of the day feels heavier. It feels backward at first, almost unfair, but over time it becomes undeniable truth. Discomfort builds internal authority. And authority over yourself is the highest form of power a person can have. You do not need extreme rituals. You do not need complicated routines. You need consistency. Choose one discomfort practice and make it non-negotiable before 6 a.m. It could be cold exposure. 10 minutes of hard physical movement. Writing down your fears instead of avoiding them. Sitting in silence without stimulation. Do it daily. Quietly. No drama. No social media posts. No applause. Just training. Because the world will test you, whether you are ready or not. Traffic will test your patience. Deadlines will test your focus. People will test your emotions. Life will test your resilience. So the real question becomes this: when that moment arrives, will you face it as someone fragile, addicted to comfort, or as someone who has already conquered discomfort before sunrise? Pain early, power later. That is how you begin to rewire your brain. And now comes the third lesson, one that is even more subtle, but just as powerful. Control the first thought, or it controls you. Before 6 a.m., your mind is like soft clay, flexible, impressionable, easily shaped, and whatever thought touches it first begins molding the direction of your entire day. For most men, that first thought is not chosen. It is inherited. Stress about work, anxiety about money, regret about yesterday, comparison with others, pressure, noise, expectations. You wake up, and before you even realize it, your mind drops into reaction mode. Not creation, not control, reaction. And once that pattern begins, it spreads through everything you do. You wake up, and before you even realize it, your mind slips into reaction mode. Not intention, not clarity, reaction. Marcus Aurelius understood how dangerous that moment was. That is why, in the quiet early hours, before anyone else spoke to him, before the noise of the empire reached his door, he reminded himself of what the day would bring. He wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant." Not because he expected misery, not because he was pessimistic, but because he was preparing his perception. That is a powerful distinction. Stoicism Breath teaches a truth that can feel harsh at first, but freeing once you understand it. It is not events that disturb you, it is your judgment about them. The same situation can break one person and strengthen another, not because the situation changed, but because the perception did. If your first thought in the morning is fear, your brain spends the entire day scanning for threats. You notice problems faster than possibilities. You feel pressure before opportunity. But if your first thought is purpose, something remarkable happens. Your brain begins scanning for solutions, for growth, for meaning. And this is not just philosophy. Neuroscience supports it. In the first 10 to 20 minutes after waking, your brain operates in what scientists call a theta-dominant state. This is a highly suggestible, highly programmable state. In simple terms, your brain is soft, open, impressionable, like clay waiting to be shaped. The thoughts you repeat during that window do not just pass through your mind. They carve patterns. Patterns become moods. Moods become habits. Habits become identity. So think about what most people do during those first moments. They check email. They open news apps. They scroll social media. They allow other people's urgency, opinions, fears, and noise to flood into their mind before they even choose their own direction. That is not harmless. That is surrender. You are handing over the steering wheel of your mind before your day even begins. And Stoics never surrender the steering wheel. Instead, they practice something intentional, a rewire ritual that can transform how your day unfolds. Before speaking, before checking your phone, before standing fully upright, ask yourself 3 simple but powerful questions. What is in my control today? What is not in my control today? Who do I choose to be, regardless of circumstances? These questions may seem small, but their effect is massive. They shift your mind from emotion to reason, from reaction to authorship, from chaos to clarity. And clarity does something incredible to your nervous system. It calms it. Your breathing steadies. Your attention sharpens. Your brain stops spinning and starts directing. Most men believe discipline begins with physical action, with working out, moving fast, doing more. But real discipline begins in an invisible place, thought. The first thought of the day is the spark. If that spark is weak, your day smolders. Slow, unfocused, reactive. But if that spark is deliberate, your day ignites. Focused, intentional, controlled. You do not need empty positive affirmations. You do not need hype. You need deliberate perspective. Instead of saying, "I'm tired," say, "I'm training." Instead of saying, "I have to deal with this," say, "I get to prove myself through this." Small reframes, massive effect. Because the man who controls his first thought controls his internal climate. and your internal climate determines everything. Storm outside, calm inside. Pressure outside, focus inside. Chaos outside, discipline inside. Before 6 a.m., the world is quiet. That silence is not empty. It is powerful. It is a weapon, if you use it correctly. Use that silence to choose your perception. Use it to decide how you will interpret the day before the day begins interpreting you. Because once the world wakes up, everything speeds up. Messages arrive. Demands appear. Noise increases. And if you did not set the tone intentionally, the noise will set it for you. Control the first thought, and you control the direction of the day. Before 6 a.m., your mind is soft clay. Whatever thought touches it first begins shaping your reality. And for most men, that thought is not chosen, it is inherited. Stress about work. Anxiety about money. Regret about yesterday. Comparison with others. Pressure from unfinished tasks. You wake up and instantly fall into reaction mode again. Marcus Aurelius knew how dangerous that cycle could be. That is why he repeated his morning preparation daily. Not once. Not occasionally. Daily. Because Stoicism teaches another brutal truth. Repetition builds identity. And the science confirms it again. In those first waking minutes, your brain is highly programmable. The thoughts you rehearse become mental grooves. Those grooves become automatic responses. And automatic responses become personality. So when you wake up and immediately check email, news, or social media, you are not just checking information. You are allowing external forces to design your emotional state. You are surrendering the steering wheel. But Stoics never surrendered the steering wheel, and neither should you. Here is the Rewire ritual, simple, direct, and powerful enough to change the way your entire day unfolds. Before you speak to anyone, before you check your phone, before you even sit fully upright in bed, pause for a moment and ask yourself 3 questions. What is in my control today? What is not in my control today? Who do I choose to be today, regardless of circumstances? These are not motivational slogans. They are anchors. When you ask these questions honestly, something shifts inside your mind. You move from emotion to reason, from reaction to opposite, from chaos to clarity. And clarity does something powerful to your nervous system. It calms you. Most men believe discipline begins with physical action, getting out of bed, working out, moving around. But true discipline begins in truth no one else can see. It begins in perception. In the very first spark that lights everything in the day. The first thought is that spark. If that spark is weak, scattered, fearful, unfocused, your day smolders. Slow, distracted, uncertain. But if that spark is deliberate, if it is chosen, your day ignites. Energy rises. Focus sharpens. Direction becomes clear. You do not need endless positive affirmations repeating empty phrases. What you need is deliberate perspective. Instead of saying, "I'm tired," shift the frame and say, "I'm training." Instead of saying, "I have to deal with this," tell yourself, "I get to prove myself through this." Small reframes, massive effect. Because the man who controls his first thought controls his internal climate, and your internal climate determines everything that follows. There can be chaos outside and calm inside, pressure outside and focus inside, noise outside and discipline inside. Before 6 a.m., the world is quiet. That quiet is not just silence, it is opportunity. It is a weapon, if you know how to use it. Use that silence to choose your perception. Use it to define how you will interpret the day before the day begins testing you. Because once the world wakes up, everything accelerates. Messages arrive. Problems appear. People demand attention. And if you do not set the tone intentionally, the noise will set it for you. Control the first thought, and you control the direction of the day. Now comes the fourth lesson, and for many people, this is the hardest one to accept. Refuse to check the world before you check yourself. The fastest way to lose your mental edge before sunrise is simple. Reach for your phone. Not to turn off the alarm. Not to check the weather. But to scroll. The moment your screen lights up, something invisible happens. You surrender internal authority. Suddenly your mind is flooded with emails, breaking news, market updates, social media posts, opinions, victories, complaints, emergencies, none of them yours, yet all of them demanding your attention. And before your feet even touch the floor, your brain is reacting. You did not choose your thoughts. You did not choose your focus. You chose distraction. Epictetus made this brutally clear centuries ago. Some things are within your control, most things are not. And your phone is a direct pipeline to everything that sits outside your control. Markets, politics, someone else's success, someone else's anger, someone else's opinion. When you check the world before checking yourself, you place your emotional state in the hands of forces you cannot influence. That is the opposite of Stoic living. Stoicism Breath is built on a different rule. Master the internal before engaging the external. And modern neuroscience explains exactly why this matters. The first stimulus your brain consumes sets your dopamine baseline for the entire day. When that stimulus is intense, fast scrolling, flashing notifications, endless novelty, your dopamine spikes sharply. And when that spike happens early, everything else afterward feels slower, harder, less rewarding. Deep work feels boring. Discipline feels dull. Focus feels heavy. You begin the day overstimulated and underdirected. That combination quietly destroys productivity and clarity. So here is the rule. No phone for the first 30 minutes. Not 5 minutes. Not just one quick check. 30 full minutes. Those first 30 minutes are your fortress. Marcus Aurelius once described the mind as a citadel, a fortress that no one could invade unless invited. Your phone is that invitation. And if you open the gates before reinforcing the walls, you weaken your day before it even begins. Instead, use those first 30 minutes deliberately. Move your body, even if it's just stretching or push-ups. Read something demanding, something that challenges your thinking. Write down your priorities, not vague hopes, but clear intentions. Sit in silence and check yourself before you check the world. Ask yourself, What truly matters today? What distractions will I ignore? What kind of man am I acting as today? There is something deeply powerful about starting your day in self-command. It creates momentum that carries into everything else: meetings, conversations, decisions, pressure. You stop reacting. You start leading. And that is how the day begins to bend in your favor. Ask yourself, right there in the quiet of the early morning, 3 questions that most people never take the time to ask. What truly matters today? What distractions will I ignore today? And what kind of man am I choosing to be today? There is something deeply powerful about beginning your day in self-command. Not reacting. Not rushing. Not letting the world decide your direction. When you start the morning this way, something subtle but powerful begins to build: momentum. And that momentum follows you into meetings, conversations, decisions, and challenges. You begin to respond instead of react. Most men live their entire lives in reaction mode. Notifications dictate their focus. Messages dictate their mood. Headlines dictate their anxiety. A message comes in, they shift. A notification sounds, they react. A news alert flashes, they worry. Their internal state becomes a reflection of whatever appears on their screen. But Stoicism Breath teaches a different approach. A Stoic refuses that arrangement. The world can wait. Your clarity cannot. When you guard your mind during the first 30 minutes of your morning, you are not being antisocial. You are being strategic. You are reinforcing your mental defenses before opening the gates. Because the moment you unlock that digital door, noise rushes in. Opinions rush in. Urgency rushes in. And once that happens, it becomes harder to think clearly. So make this rule non-negotiable. Before you consume, create. Before you react, reflect. Before you check the world, check yourself. That is how winning the day truly begins. Before 6 a.m., before the noise, before the pressure. And now we arrive at the 5th lesson, one of the most overlooked skills in modern life: build ruthless clarity. Most men do not fail because they lack effort. They fail because they lack direction. They wake up. They move. They answer messages. They attend meetings. They stay busy. But they drift. They react to whatever shows up instead of moving towards something intentional. And motion without direction is just sophisticated drifting. Seneca said it best: "If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable." Think about that carefully. You can wake up at 5 a.m. You can work for 12 hours. You can stay busy from sunrise to sunset. But if you do not know where you are going, you are not progressing, you are exhausting yourself. That is why clarity must be built before the world starts moving. Before 6 a.m., you have a rare advantage. No meetings. No calls. No interruptions. Just silence. And that silence is where ruthless clarity is forged. Not vague goals. Not motivational slogans. Real clarity. Here is the morning clarity protocol: simple, direct, and incredibly effective. Ask yourself 3 questions and write the answers down. First, what must move forward today? Not 10 tasks. Not a long list. just one major action that moves your life forward. Second, what will I deliberately ignore today? Distractions do not disappear on their own. They must be rejected in advance. If you do not decide what does not matter, everything will feel urgent. Third, who am I becoming through today's actions? Because identity drives behavior more than motivation ever will. Most men plan tasks. Very few define identity. If you see yourself as someone trying to get in shape, you negotiate. You hesitate. But if you see yourself as a disciplined man, your actions change automatically. You do not argue with yourself. You act in alignment with who you believe you are. That is what clarity really is. Not productivity. Alignment. When you wake up and immediately define what matters, your brain begins filtering the world differently. Interruptions feel smaller. Opinions feel weaker. Pressure becomes manageable because you know where you are sailing. There is something deeply stabilizing about direction. It reduces decision fatigue. It reduces anxiety. It reduces comparison. You stop chasing every opportunity that appears. You start executing the right ones. And yet, most men make a critical mistake. They open their email before defining their mission. That is backwards. Your mission should dictate your response to email, not the other way around. Clarity is a weapon. It cuts through noise. It protects your time. It strengthens your authority. And authority over your own time is one of the rarest assets in a distracted world. You do not need an elaborate planner. You do not need complicated systems. You need a sheet of paper and 5 focus minutes. Define the when. Define the distraction. Define the identity. Then move. The man who starts the day with clarity moves differently. He speaks differently. He decides faster. He is not perfect, but he is directed. And direction compounds. Clear days build clear weeks. Clear weeks build clear years. Clear years build powerful lives. Before 6 a.m., choose your port, or the winds of the world will choose it for you. Now comes the 6th lesson, one that separates those who drift from those who dominate their day. Act before motivation arrives. Most men wait. They wait to feel ready. They wait to feel inspired. They wait to feel confident. And in that waiting, days disappear. Opportunities fade. Momentum dies. Motivation feels powerful, but it is unreliable. It rises with excitement and disappears with difficulty. The Stoics understood this deeply. They never trusted emotion to lead action. They trusted discipline instead. There is a brutal truth that most people do not want to hear, but once you understand it, everything about your mornings begins to change. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. Most people have been taught the opposite. They believe they must feel inspired before they begin. They wait for the perfect mood, the right energy, the spark of excitement. But in reality, motivation is not the engine. Action is. Psychologists call this behavioral activation, and the science behind it is simple but powerful. The moment you begin a task, even for just 5 minutes, your brain starts releasing dopamine. Not the kind tied to pleasure or entertainment, but the kind associated with progress. and progress creates momentum. Momentum builds confidence. Confidence builds discipline. Discipline builds identity. But if you sit still waiting to feel ready, inertia takes over. The longer you wait, the heavier everything feels. Before 6 a.m., this principle becomes critical, because the moment you wake up, your brain is looking for direction. If your first question is, "Do I feel like working out today?" you have already lost the battle. Feelings are weather. They change constantly. Discipline is climate. It remains steady regardless of conditions. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Notice something important about that statement. He did not say you have power over your feelings. He said your mind, your decisions, your actions. That is where control lives. So here is the morning discipline strategy that works not because it is dramatic, but because it is consistent. Set daily minimums, not massive goals. Not unrealistic plans that overwhelm you before the day begins. Minimums. 10 minutes of movement. 15 minutes of reading. 20 minutes focused on your most important task. Small enough that you cannot justify skipping. Significant enough that they slowly reshape your identity. Because something powerful happens when you complete your minimum before 6 a.m. You win early. And early wins change everything. You walk differently. Your posture changes. Your tone shifts. You handle pressure with more control. Not because you feel lucky, but because you have evidence, real, undeniable evidence, that you act regardless of mood. And that evidence rewires your brain more deeply than any motivational speech ever could. The key is simple, but not always easy. Move before thinking too much. Stand up and start the workout before your mind begins negotiating. Open the book before questioning whether it is worth it. Begin the task before evaluating whether you feel ready. The first 5 minutes will feel like resistance. That is normal. That is expected. That is the moment most people quit. But if you push through those first few minutes, momentum takes over. Movement becomes easier. Focus becomes clearer. Energy begins to rise. Most men are not lazy. They are overthinking. They are negotiating with feelings that were never meant to lead them. Before 6 a.m., you face a simple but powerful choice: follow emotion or command action. One creates fluctuation. The other builds identity. The disciplined man does not ask, "Do I feel motivated?" He asks, "What must be done?" And then he begins. Beginning, consistently, is what separates the average from the formidable. And now we arrive at the seventh lesson, the one that cuts deeper than all the others. The one that strips away excuses in a single thought. Remember that you will die, so wake up fully. There is one idea that can instantly eliminate procrastination. One thought that can silence excuses. One realization that can make a 5:30 a.m. wake-up feel urgent instead of optional. You will die. Not someday in theory. Not in some distant, abstract future. One day, without negotiation, without delay, your mornings will end. The Stoics called this memento mori. Remember that you must die. Not as a dark obsession, but as a sharpening tool. A lens that brings life into focus. Seneca wrote something that still echoes today. You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire. In other words, we fear small inconveniences as if they are disasters, yet we waste time as if we have an unlimited supply. Most men live as if they have endless mornings ahead of them. They snooze casually. They scroll endlessly. They postpone ambition. They delay discipline. But imagine this for a moment. If you had only 30 mornings left in your life, would you hit snooze tomorrow? If you had only 1 year left, would you spend your first waking hour consuming other people's lives instead of building your own? Mortality clarifies everything. It removes trivial concerns. It exposes distractions. It shrinks excuses. When you wake up before 6 a.m. and remember that your life is finite, something shifts inside you. The morning becomes sacred, not dramatic, not emotional, sacred. Each sunrise becomes an asset, a resource with an expiration date. And that perspective changes your brain in powerful ways. It moves you from passive to intentional, from drifting to decisive, from fragile to focused. You stop treating the day as something to survive. You start treating it as something to use. The Stoics practiced something called negative visualization. They imagined loss, not to create fear, but to create appreciation and urgency. Imagine losing the opportunity you have today. Imagine never being able to improve again. Imagine never repairing a broken relationship. Imagine never building strength. Imagine never correcting mistakes. Suddenly, 5:45 a.m. does not feel early anymore. It feels necessary. And suddenly, waking up early no longer feels like a burden. It feels necessary. There is a powerful difference between simply waking up and waking up fully. Most people wake up physically. Their eyes open. Their bodies move. But very few people wake up existentially, fully aware that time is not guaranteed, that this morning is not ordinary, and that every sunrise carries weight. To wake up existentially is to understand that time is limited. And once you truly understand that, discipline becomes easier, not because it feels good, but because wasting time begins to feel painful. Before 6 a.m., remind yourself of something most people avoid thinking about. This morning will never come again. Not this version of you. Not this exact body. Not this exact opportunity. You are not just training habits. You are shaping the limited days of your life. And when a man truly understands that his time is finite, something changes inside him. He stops negotiating with weakness. He stops waiting for motivation. He stops drifting through mornings as if they do not matter. He rises fully. There is a reason the Stoics kept death close to their thoughts. Not because they were negative, not because they were dark, but because they were clear. Clarity about death creates intensity about life. Most people treat time casually because it feels abundant. Days blur together. Weeks repeat. Years accelerate. And somewhere deep inside, there is a quiet assumption. I still have time. But no one knows that. And that uncertainty is not something to fear, it is something to use. When you wake up before 6 a.m. and consciously remember that your life is finite, your mind sharpens. The trivial begins to fall away. The important rises to the surface. You stop asking, How can I stay comfortable? You start asking, how should I use this day? That is where memento mori becomes practical. It transforms the morning from a routine into a responsibility. Ask yourself honestly, if this were your last year, how would you train? If this were your last decade, how would you focus? If this were your final chapter, how would you speak, act, and decide? Death compresses perspective, and compression creates precision. Most hesitation in the morning comes from illusion. The illusion that missing one day does not matter. The illusion that drifting today is harmless. The illusion that there will always be another sunrise. But discipline compounds, and so does regret. Every morning you win builds strength. Every morning you waste builds erosion. You may not notice the difference immediately, but over months, over years, that gap becomes massive. The Stoics were not obsessed with productivity. They were obsessed with alignment with virtue, purpose, and responsibility. And a life of virtue begins with how you treat your time. Marcus Aurelius wrote words that still echo across centuries. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Read that slowly. Let that determine what you do. That includes 5:30 a.m. That includes whether you scroll or strengthen, whether you delay or decide. When you internalize mortality, excuses begin to feel childish, because the stakes are no longer small. This is not about building abs. This is not about perfect routines. This is about honoring the fact that your existence is limited. A limited resource demands intentional use. When you rise before 6 a.m. with that awareness, you step into the day differently. Your movements become sharper. Your focus becomes deeper. Your gratitude becomes stronger. Even discomfort begins to feel meaningful, because pain used for growth is not wasted pain, but wasted time becomes intolerable. There is something deeply empowering about knowing your days are numbered. It makes you dangerous to mediocrity. It makes you resistant to distraction. It makes you unwilling to trade your potential for temporary comfort. So tomorrow morning, when the alarm sounds, do not just think about discipline. Think about finality. One day, there will be a last morning. You will not know when it comes, but it will come. And between now and that unknown sunrise, you have a choice. Sleep through your potential, or rise and meet it. Fully aware that time is not promised. Wake up like your life depends on it, because it does. Most men believe winning the day starts at noon. It does not. It starts in the dark, before 6 a.m., before the noise, before the demands, before the world begins pulling at your attention. There is a window in those early hours, a quiet battlefield where identity is decided. Today, you saw the truth. You do not lose your life in dramatic moments. You lose it in small negotiations. You lose it when you hit snooze, when you chase comfort instead of commitment, when you let your first thought control you, when you check the world before checking yourself, when you drift without clarity, when you wait for motivation, when you forget that your time is limited. These are not small habits. They are identity patterns. And here is the good news. Identity can be rewired. Not through hype. Not through emotion. But through disciplined repetition. If you apply even 3 of these 7 lessons consistently, your mornings will change. And when your mornings change, everything else follows. Your posture changes. Your focus changes. Your standards change. You stop reacting, and you start leading. Remember, this is not about waking up early to impress anyone. It is about waking up strong enough to command your own mind. Tomorrow morning, when the alarm rings, there will be a decision. No audience. No applause. Just you. Win that moment, win the morning. And over time, you will not just win the day. You will build a mind that refuses to be conquered. If this message resonated with you, write this below. I rise with discipline. And this is Stoicism Breath, where every morning is another chance to master your mind and lead your life.